Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have a very special episode for you. So for those of you that have been following this series for a while now, every week we do a special episode with our co-host, Qamar Zaman of KISS PR, and he's holding a master class where I ask him questions, essentially, and we dive into some of today's most relevant topics for business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives. So first off, just to get us kicked off, so Qamar, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Adam, for having me again. And today I have a great topic for you.
Oh, man. So we are doing the warm-up and the prep for this. I mean, think differently. I mean, what a great topic. I guess first thing first, I mean, what you always bring us great topics, but what inspired this one? Because this one's a little unique for us, I feel.
It is. So before I answer that question, I want to tell the audience the topic we discussed last week, which was the content for Google. We talked about the Google update. And then we talked about, the content. The biggest challenge of a small business owner is coming up with content ideas, and they struggle with that. So, as I was preparing for today's episode, I could talk technical, but I said, you know what? I want to go back to the history because I learned this from my dad that the best way to learn is to read the books of history. So I went back to the books of history. And I wanted to bring back the knowledge of advertising from the perspective of people that have really made it successful. So that's why I created this episode, the Think Different episode.
And so let's just kind of dive right in here. So think differently. So what does this mean?
Okay, so Think Different. I'm going to tell you a story, Adam, since we are a storyteller. So starting, if you recall, Steve Jobs, who everybody knows about, right? He was fired in 1985 from Apple, and then he was brought back in 1997 after being fired. And the reason they brought him back because Apple as a company was really struggling. Their brand was in shambles, and they were like trying to bring back. They had tried different things and things were not working. So they thought, well, let's bring Mr. Jobs back because he's the guy that created it. So when they brought him back, and I'll leave the politics behind, I'll go into the advertising and the marketing of it. So when they brought Steve Jobs back, Steve had two priorities. His first priority, obviously, to fix the product because Apple products were failing a lot. And the second big priority was to revive the Apple's brand image. And I don't know how far you know, but Apple's brand image was pretty much, it was being lost. IBM was going back to it. And they had a product at that time. They were doing marketing. It was called Pink. So I don't know if you know that, but they had a product called Pink, and Jobs came in. So Jobs was doing some research. And in my own research, I found that he got inspired by a company that makes shoes. Guess which company is that? It's Nike. So Steve Jobs was inspired by Nike, and he studied their marketing, and he found out that Nike was a company that was very unique to, in those days, I'm talking about the 1997. Every shoe company like the Reebok and Adidas, they were promoting their shoe, they were talking about the product, whereas Nike was not talking about it. Nike was mostly focusing their effort and they were honoring the athletics only. Every campaign that Nike was doing, and I want you to people that are listening to this episode, pause that episode and do a Google search and look at Nike ads in those days. Historically, they can go to Google Images and see. And they can see that all Nike ads were talking about, how were people feeling different. They were talking about the personalities rather than the shoe itself. So, Adidas was talking about the shoe. Nike, even though they had the best air soles, and Reeboks were comparing their soles to Nike, etc. But Nike did not do that. So Steve got inspired by that, and then he was approached by an ad agency. The name of the ad agency was TBWA, and the CEO was Lee Chow, just for your context. So when Lee Chow and his team presented the idea, they came up with a campaign, and that was called Think Different. Hence, the topic today that we are talking about is Think Different. So that was a very famous campaign. You can do Think Different on Google and you will see the entire history on that. So I want to pause here and let me know if you have any questions before I go really into the mechanics of this further.
So yeah, and I recall this. So the idea of what Steve Jobs was able to do, it was very different. So now, and I love that you bring up the Nike example. So now that we're going further down the line now, and I would argue like a lot of the Nike things that they pioneered in the first place, like that's the way like ads are done now, right? And if you think about it now that I think a little bit further, now the idea of a native ad. I don't know, like Nike's the one that sticks out in my head, but like they kind of like created in my mind, at least for my generation and what I resonate with, like the idea of a native ad. It's like I used to just love watching the ads and watching the athletes and all that stuff, and the shoes were just part of it.
Exactly. You remember the shoe because it connects, but it's actually talking about the athletes and perspective. And now all the ads, if you do a Google search today for shoe ads, they're pretty much talking about the athletics rather than the shoe itself. So Nike actually coined the concept, and now everybody uses it. But Nike is obviously ahead of the game.
No, it's great. So continue with these stories. If you're coming with the fire today, Qamar, keep it going.
Yeah. So when Steve Jobs looked at and he got inspired by Nike, he did not want to. And if you recall, in those days, there was Dell, there was IBM, etc., and all the other computers like the Microns. They were talking about the gigabit and the memory in the computer. You will open up Wall Street Journal, New York Times, whatever newspaper you were looking at those days, you were looking at the computer ad and you would see all the megahertz, etc., etc. But Steve did it differently. What he did was, in 17 days, he created a campaign which talked about. They showed in the ad Albert Einstein. In billboards, they created billboards with Nelson Mandela. They created a billboard that I distinctly remember myself because when I came to America, with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and there was Apple. And at that time, I didn't understand, why are they showing these people? What has this got to do with the computer? Because, I came to study computer science and I had no connection, obviously no marketing knowledge at that time. To me, it didn't quite understand what they were doing, these big billboards of personalities. What they were trying to show is for the human brain, they were showing people that had greatness in them, i.e. Nelson Mandela, i.e. Albert Einstein, John Lennon, Winston Churchill. So when we remember that, and then we see right behind the logo of, Apple, it's thinking different, and they were showing the greatness. In a story, we will always remember those things, So we don't have to remember, what's the specification. We can go to the store and find out. And that became so successful as a result that In 17 days, the Think Different campaign was launched, and September 28, 1997, the TV ads, print ads, and the campaign went live, and it only took 17 days in this whole exercise for the Apple company to survive and revive, all with the concept of thinking different. So this is the total crux of the story, what Steve did, and he made the winner of the ad. The ad actually won the award of the TV Arts Award. It also won the Canes Award. So what I want to sum up in this marketing is, why did he do that? Obviously, he got inspired by a shoe company. He thought differently. But why am I telling you this story today? The reason I'm telling you this story is that most companies make a mistake when they're creating content. If you remember, when we started this dialogue, I said, people struggle with creating content. But if you think about today's content, I'm not talking about anything about my product. I'm not even promoting my company. I'm not talking anything about it. I am actually talking about Steve Jobs. I'm talking about Nelson Mandela. So when your audience that is listening and they said, well, this was a great episode, let's go to search for Mission Matters and type this guy that talked about story of Steve Jobs, they will find it. So I have used what we call in digital marketing, other people's content to tell a story. So it's very easy that if you want to create your own content, that's perfect. But if you don't, go look at the history, go find other people's stories, and then write those stories and connect back with your brand, and then again, create a brand halo. So the key message is, you can take other person's story, create a brand halo, and it'll become awesome.
So lots of business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives listening to this right now, and I mean, a lot of people have been following the show, and they're listening to this for marketing tips and other things. It's a marketing show, right? So can you give me an example? So I get it, and some people, when they listen to this, I mean, they'll get it immediately, but others are like, oh, that's Steve Jobs, and oh, that's the way kind of sometimes somebody's mind can go, so it's too high level. Can you give an example of what this would look like if you were, a local small business? Like, how would they use this concept of using somebody else's content and all the things that you're mentioning today or if they're thinking differently?
If you're a small business and if you Google search or look around in your neighborhood, who has become famous in the past history? Because if you remember, 20 years ago, there was Radio Shack, but that doesn't exist. But Radio Shack was really successful. So if you take ideas from the businesses that were really once successful, maybe not there anymore, or the ones that were really successful and they have gone to the highest level, and you take those brand images and their history, you can recreate your story based on those brands. And that's what I keep doing in my marketing. Like what I do is I go into, like, one of the biggest competitors is, I won't mention their name because then I'll be talking about them. It's a big business company that sells press release, right? Mm-hmm. Now I can never compete with them because they are so huge. They have big infrastructure and they sell press releases. If you type press release service, they will show up, So what I did was I used the keyword press release, but I also called myself a storyteller. So now most people, and I was very new in this, so now most people that wanted to start to tell their stories because they did not really have a press release, but everybody has a story. So I started talking about, hey, you don't have to have a press release, just tell your story and use our platform to do it. As a result, we leveraged the press release machine, which we talked about in the past, but we now tell the stories. So there are many ways a small business user can do that. So talk about other people's story. And the second thing that I want to talk about is when you talked about the small business never focuses on branding. They try to do brand. They think their brand is their website and the logo, but that's beyond, brand is more than that. What they need to do is, what does the brand do? What is the pain they're trying to solve? And that is the story they need to tell in their blogs, in their press releases, in their podcast, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully that answers your question.
So let's go a little bit further into so that's great, but I want to go further into the idea of thinking differently, specifically for the small business owner. So let's say, you're a lawyer, you're a financial advisor, you're somebody, that with a pretty, traditional profession, I would argue, that's now finding themselves in this day and age of social media and these other things that maybe they hadn't done in the past. I mean, somebody might have their practice, they've been in business, 10, 15 years, they never had to really, they thought they were doing the branding thing, but it's like you mentioned, it might have been a logo, their website, everything matches great. But now they're listening to this right now and they're like, well, okay, I'm a financial advisor, I'm a lawyer, like how do I think differently? Like that's okay, that's Apple computers, that's a big campaign, but I'm not going to do that as a small business owner. Like, so what do I do? Like, how does that, like, talk to that person for a moment.
Okay, so since you mentioned an avatar as a lawyer, and incidentally, a week or 2 weeks ago, maybe, I got a call from a friend of mine he's actually my client, and he said to me that I know by reading your bio on LinkedIn that you help lawyers. And my wife, we have a small practice, we have a small basic website, and we are in the business of car accidents, and they specialize in personal injury. So, but we are not getting, our website is ranking on the search results, but we are not getting the kind of people that we look for. So I said, okay, well, what kind of people are you looking for? He says, the kind of cases you're looking for is car accidents. So I said, okay, let me do some research. And I did research. I did find him. But I found that in Google search, people that are searching were mostly searching for, I got hit, I need a lawyer, I had a car wreck, I need a lawyer. But they were not typing the website for motor vehicle accident lawyer. And his website was targeting motor vehicles. As a result, he was not getting found for a car wreck. He was not getting found for a truck wreck, etc. So I said, why don't you change these few words and then go find a couple of clients that you have had and shoot some YouTube videos, spend some money or do it yourself, and put some videos on YouTube that talk about a review by one of your customers. So it's other people's content that talks about the wrecks, etc. And once he did that, and we did a basic press release for them and some blogs, he started to get the bites. So it was just thinking differently of how people do, because in his mind, he was a motor vehicle or personal injury lawyer. We made him think differently to what the market is searching for. As a result, once we started to create that awareness, and people started to find that content, they started to find him. And there are many, many case studies. I could, talk about pretty much all the verticals that I work with. So this is just another example.
And that makes so much sense. So then just even sometimes you're doing a lot of things right, but then maybe the product, so in his case, it's kind of like juxtaposed to your example, like, so for his case, the product was fine. He was fine with his business, his service, like that was fine. It was more so just like the positioning, and he had to make a couple of tweaks to then get the expected result that he wanted ultimately from the search engines and from his like overall marketing efforts.
Correct. So there were two key things that we made the changes. We didn't do a lot of changes. We didn't, do a major change. What we did was we went to 3 customers and we asked them for testimonials. And why did we do 3? Why not 1? Why not 2? 1 is, if you put 1 testimonial, it looks like a fluke. If it's 2, maybe you got lucky. 3 is now, the guy is consistently getting more, and then you can say we have more. So at least 3 is a sweet spot, in my opinion. So that's what made a difference. And then we talked not about the law firm. We made the character in this movie that we created, the video that we created for the client, as they were the heroes and their life was disturbed, and how they had an injury, how they were searching, how they found this lawyer, and how he made their life different. So that was the key element when A company always talks about me, 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 me. People don't connect to it, but when they talk about the person, the patient, the injury, injury guy, injured guy, that is important because then people connect to it, and I have a big story on that next week, so we'll talk about it. But important that you talk about the person that you're helping rather than, be the hero in the movie. You don't want to be the James Bond. You want to be the guy that James Bond helps.
And so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to kind of, and just to elaborate, so the way that maybe most people are doing that, like that exact same scenario right now, the way that most advertising, or not most, but many of the people that are doing it maybe incorrectly or could stand some improvement, is that all they would be doing is talking about me, right? Like, oh, you've been in an accident. We can help. Like, these are our services. This is what we do. This is what we do. This is what we do. Pretty much that would be the incorrect way to go about it, would you argue?
That's right. So the incorrect way is if you Google search and search for about 10 lawyers, you will see most of them are talking about themselves versus you will get, and you will think they're all the same. But when you will find out of the 10, one website that is actually talking about other people. He's not talking about them. He says, yeah, I'm the lawyer, but here are the, 5-star reviews of 100 people that have helped. That's what is important. So that's what people will remember, and then that's how they will associate that person with the law firm, with the lawyer.
Man, that's big time, and that is different, and I think the good part about this is this kind of puts some meat to the subject overall, just on the bone, just like is that you don't have to have this huge different change in campaign, and like you were mentioning, like Apple level advertising that's going to win awards and do other things. Like, you can think differently, like right from where you're at in your office right now, and there's probably some changes or some tweaks that you can make that possibly aren't even going to cost you any more than you're already spending on different things. It's just a matter of just making that commitment to mentally take a step back and say, hey, how can I do this differently?
Totally. And to give you an example, a perfect example is missionmanners.com. If you started this podcast and every morning you got up and recorded a podcast and you talked about how great you are and how many people you have helped.
That's not what I do? No, I'm just playing.
That would be great. But who would want to come every day and listen
to Adam,
right?
My mom would. My mom probably would. That's probably it. My mom would be like, oh, thank you.
Even she would time you out. But every day,
she would.
Every day we come back to the site because we want to listen to other people's stories, because at some point our own story resonates with somebody else's. There always is. When I go to the movies, I become the James Bond in the cinema because my story has somehow connection to that, right? When you go to a movie, and if it's a romantic movie, somehow you may become that romantic hero because your girlfriend left you. Who knows what the story is. But we always adapt the character, right? So when we are going back and we adapt to that character, right, we remember things, and that's what keeps us going.
That's great. So I think you've also prepared a little treat for us to listen to today. Is that right, Qamar?
Correct. So that when they listen to the podcast,
I want you to tee this up. So what are we listening to? Because we'll have this one up before we hit play. What are we listening to?
Yeah, what you're going to listen to is back in time, and how when you actually listen, it will actually give you goosebumps. So that's where I will leave it. Because at the end of the day, it's not about us. It's about the life, the things that we change. You want to become a legend. You want to leave something behind. You will enjoy that video.
All right, and so we're going to push play now. Give me one moment.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
All right, so man, Qamar, goosebumps. I'll just say, like that's something special. That's a moment in time, and that's something that like we'll always remember.
Exactly.
So that being said, Qamar, I first off, you and I, when we get talking, we can talk about this all day, but we're about out of time on today's episode. So that being said, if somebody's listening to this right now or watching it on YouTube and they want to learn more about KISS PR and to connect with you and your team, I mean, what's the best way for them to do that?
KISSPR.com, missionmatters.com, because all my episodes are there, so definitely. missionmatters.com and KISSPR.com. Just search for Qamar Zaman, and I'm all over. So,
fantastic. Well, thank you as always, Qamar. Great having you on the show this week, and I can't wait to get you back next week. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. Hope you learned a lot. If you did, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Definitely want you to be a return listener and visitor. Have many more mission-based entrepreneurs and businesses coming on the line. And Qamar, as always a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.